Oh yeah, the voice changed and everything. The voice changed of the person completely.
Okay.
And
it identified itself as a spirit guide.
Oh yeah, spirit counselor, yeah.
Okay, a spirit counselor. And then proceeded to tell him all the events that he was asking,
Yes.
answer his questions?
And there was a certain question that was asked, and the spirit counselor said, I will have Lord Remy and Lord Alphonse duplicate, in other words, the dialogue that had taken place.
Oh,
and the two other
drama.
Yeah,
a little
and the two other men
Men
fulfilled what he was looking for. But the one thing that interests me is the mayor of Montreal, Camillien Hood. During World War II, at the beginning of the war, he was very controversial when it regards to the war effort. He would tell the French-speaking boys not to go into the armed service, see, because you're going to go and shed your blood for the British, you know, and we're their servants, so to speak, and all that, and he didn't want him to go into war, and they put him in prison. He was jailed for the length of the war for this. Now, the man said, I would like to have you tell me, to the spirit, to give me part of the speech that was given by Camillien Hood on the steps of the Montreal City Hall on a certain date. There are different versions of what has taken place, and you, Lord, would know the exact one.
Now, the mayor of Montreal was still alive.
Was still alive.
And this historian is asking what was actually said at a speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
The spirit counselor said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. All of my activities and my people have taken place in Europe. However, after my departure, our departure, other spirits will come and help you. And sure enough, the guy vibrated a little bit, and he's back, and he said, boy, how long? He said, 20 minutes, been used as a channel. So they, again, the spirit entered into him, and the spirit said he was a spirit counselor that could give him the information that he was looking for. So, again, it was given verbally, and it was the voice of Camillien Hood.
Now, how did you know that it was the voice?
Well, because of the fact, you see, I was a youngster in those days, just about ready to go into the army. And Camillien, we used to listen to the radio. We had no television in those days, so it was only radio, and read newspaper. And all the speeches of Camillien made, and all of it was on the radio all the time. And in those days, they had no tape recorders, as we have now. So Camillien would have to go to the Canadian Broadcasting Studio, where they made a record, a real phonograph record. And then they played it over and over, for the rest of the day.
So you listened to those as a teenager before you went into the army, so you knew his voice.
So I knew his voice really good. So I said to George, he was sitting next to me, he said, isn't it amazing? He said, if you think that's amazing, wait, he says, until the spirits impersonate one of the departed people that you know, personally, like an uncle or a brother or a sister or something like that. He says, that is unique. But that's the way it was. You are able to reproduce a voice, man, and the just to perfection. The spirits are exceedingly proud of this. Because, and this also was right up my alley, the priest said that as the times on this planet gets more and more difficult, and calamities of all kinds are striking the planet more and more frequently, demon spirits are going to impress people with the importance of Sunday sacredness.
Roger, when I was a teenager back in the 1970s, I remember a song that came out talking about the age of Aquarius. And since then, we've seen the development of the New Age, and I wondered if back when you were involved in spirit worship, if they talked about New Age at all.
Oh yes, it was a big thing that was coming up. One of the major deceptions of the last days. And the priest told us, we talked quite a while, And then he said, could I have a little bit more of your time? I want to tell you something very fascinating. He says, the grand plan, the master's grand plan for harvesting the nations, for harvesting the multitudes of the earth into his cause, just before the close of the great controversy between the forces of good and evil. So we continued, after we expressed ourselves that we're deeply interested to know more about the activities of spirits. And he said, it's going to be done in a unique manner. This grand plan is going to take people are going to eat the stuff. Because he says, spirits, demon spirits, will declare themselves to be inhabitants of far distant planets in the galaxies that are coming to warn the inhabitants of planet Earth of the impending destruction of the planet unless something seriously proper is done to avoid it. And he went on saying that they will claim to have out-of-body experiences. Are you familiar with out-of-body experiences?
I've read about them.
In other words, so there's some persons are supposed to be able to, they believe in their immortal soul.
Astral soul projection.
Yes, right. Goes into different parts of the world and sees things and come back and then they write all about it.
I've heard of that.
So, due to the fact that the millions of the earth, people, believe in people having an immortal soul, it has to be readily accepted when the spirits will, through a trance medium, converse with influential people of the land, you see.
Now, what is a trance medium?
It's a channeler today.
What is known today as a channeler?
Channeler, yeah.
Okay.
Shirley MacLaine's experience of getting involved with spiritism and with the supposed inhabitants of far distant planets in the galaxies, I taped the whole thing in 3 hours.
And you were hearing the fulfillment of what this high priest had said 45 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So he went on explaining about the fact that the spirits will show themselves willing to give valuable guidance that will not only help people avoid the destruction of the planet, but it would cause it to enter into a higher state of existence. For instance, he said the spirits will promise, and this is a big word, promise, that if their recommendations are followed carefully, they will usher in a glorious new age of peace and prosperity, and there'll be there'll be no more wars, see. There'll be no more famines. There'll be no more people getting unhappy with one another. Neighbors will love neighbor, and social unrest will not take place no more. There'll be perfect happiness for 1,000 years. That's what the Spirit is going to promise.
Almost like the Garden of Eden created all over again.
And now we find that a lot of preachers are preaching the great age of glorious new age of victory over wars, victory over social unrest, victory over famines, and victory over all kinds of...
and he used the words New Age to describe what was coming.
It would be a glorious new age, yeah. And this is exactly what the movement is all about today. And he went on and said, as I said a little earlier, that as life on this planet becomes more and more difficult, and calamities will strike the planet more and more frequently, the spirits at that time are going to put all their effort to impress religious leaders, to bring before the masses of the earth the sacredness of Sunday. See? They will teach Sunday sacredness. And with the religious leaders looking forward to 1,000 years of perfect peace on earth, they will put all their effort into it. Then laws will be passed by governments. One person asked, what's going to happen about people that don't believe in the Spirit's recommendation? The priest says, that's no problem at all. Laws will be passed by governments that will force people to go along with it, regardless of whether they believe in it or not. And he says the law enforcement officers will explain to people, make it clear that such a law is necessary to assure the well-being of all people. He says the laws will be passed with no effort at all. And then he went on and he said about the fact that the vulnerability of the sun, which in ages past was such an irritant to the Creator. All of these great nations and other nations, of smaller ones, were all involved in sun worship. And in those centuries, the Creator found that teaching of worship of the sun to be a terrible irritant. And he said, it is going again to take place, but not in worshiping the sun, in remembering Sunday to keep it holy. He made a statement I would never forget. He says, by the observance of the day upon which the master, Satan, has placed the unction of his authority and power, he receives homage, regardless of whom people claim to worship. Isn't that something? So, can you understand now why I had 28 Bible studies in 1 week and started to go to church on Sabbath? And I never missed since until I became sick.
The issue of a day of worship came up in that meeting. Was Sunday the only day mentioned?
Well, you see, the priest mentioned, yes, about the fact Satan has chosen Sunday as his day. The Creator has chosen the 7th day of the week. Lucifer has chosen to call his day the first day of the week, Sunday. You see? And regardless of what people claim to worship, they're worshiping God, the Creator, by observing that day, that particular day, they are bringing homage and respect.
Now, at that time in your life, you were 20 years old or so. Had you ever heard of a Seventh-day Adventist?
Never in my life.
In that meeting,
they didn't talk about Seventh-day Adventist. They talked strictly about Adventist.
Well, they just talked, but they did. The word Adventist was mentioned.
The priest was telling us that necromancy, as I mentioned earlier, is the belief that the dead have entered into a higher state of existence, etc. And he says, for centuries, friendly demon spirits have worked diligently to establish and uphold in the religious convictions of all people the belief that man has an immortal soul. See? Then he boasted about the fact that the master was so smart in that he had deceived the whole world, even in this age of great scientific knowledge and understanding. Then one person put his hand up, and that priest says, yes, we want to say something? He says, what about the Adventists? You can't count them deceived regarding the state of the dead. And I got a question. What about, how come that they can't be brought under the great deception? The priest said, you're right. I apologize, says here, I made a mistake. When I said that all the millions of people living on the face of this planet, everybody, you know, was honoring the great master, I forgot the Adventists. There's so few in number when you figure the billions and all people, I didn't even think of mentioning him. So I'm sorry. Then he says, secondly, the reason why they can't be brought under the great deception, let me explain about it. Now he said, my next statement is going to upset some of you. But what I'm telling you is the honest truth. It is factual. It's reality. The fact that the Adventists observe the biblical Sabbath of creation and reverence the Creator on that day, it makes it impossible for the spirits to deceive them. They are giving very special help and great spiritual insight. And he said, under these conditions, they are not ordinary people. And that stayed with me, man, just like this. And when I heard the word Adventist, when Cyril told me later on, which we're going to cover later, I asked him, I said, what denomination do you belong to? He said, I'm a Seventh Adventist. What's that again? He said, I'm a Seventh Adventist. I said, is that the same thing as Adventist? Oh yeah, he says, a lot of people call us the Adventists. They don't talk about the 70s, same thing. Boy, I was interested.
I bet you were. Now,
I wanted to know what his Bible said.
Yeah, I bet you did. Because that was the one group that under question only, the high priest of the demonic worship house, the thing that he had said to you was, this is the one group that can't be deceived.
That's right.
And so somewhere back inside that that resistance you had came out, and you awoke.
A few months later, that experience, unique experience, was instrumental in helping me make a decision for Christ. And also, I had no hesitation to join myself to God's commandment-keeping people because of the fact that I knew what kind of people they were. And after having had 28 Bible studies in 1 week, I started to keep the Sabbath, kept forever. But you see, the time that I had these Bible studies, 4 hours per evening, we started at 7 o'clock and finished at 11 o'clock at night. We had this Bible study similar to what you showed me the other day, that you have in your pocket. The Bible studies were about an hour. There were questions, and then you looked at the verses that they gave you in the Bible, and you had your answer. It was so fantastic. And the Spirit of God was really ministering to me the graces of redemption. Every moment of all those Bible studies was precious. Precious, precious, precious.
Roger, at that time, your major language was French. You did not speak English, and all of this happened in the French language in Montreal. How long after you became a Seventh-day Adventist, or after you learned of Seventh-day Adventists, did you read the book Great Controversy by Ellen White?
Well, I joined the church. I first had a Bible study in October of '46. In April of '47, I was baptized into the church. In September of that year, Hilda and I got married. And the French church in Montreal gave us, as a wedding gift, the Conflict of the Ages series. And I had not read the Great Controversy up to then.
But then you read it.
Yeah.
And what went through your mind when you read the book Great Controversy, thinking back on the experience you'd had maybe just a year or so before?
That's right.
What went through your mind?
This person is inspired. This person has got knowledge that nobody else has on the face of the earth, except, the Spiritists that I was mentioning, because it's so unique. See?
Well, I find it very remarkable that they were willing to share the strategy that Satan is working on with this group. Of course, their plan was that it would never get out.
That's right.
Under seal of death.
That's right. Their plan is that you don't have to worry about saying anything about the Great Master. Because as soon as anybody strays some, the spirits will tell the high priest right away what's taking place. They did with my Bible study by Wednesday night. I studied on Monday and Tuesday. By Wednesday night, the spirit counselor appeared to the high priest and says, you have one of your defectors. He says, that mono guy, you're going to get rid of him. Because he's out there studying the Bible with the Adventists, the people that the Master hates most on the face of the earth. And the high priest almost had a heart attack. Because he said, I kind of like you. He said, that's what he told my friend. Because I didn't see him after that. But he told my friend, to try to convince me to go back, to spirit worship.
Roger, you were 72 hours away from making a full commitment to the elite spirit worship. How did God rescue you at that strategic moment?
Well, I'll tell you, I should really go back a couple of weeks in time. As the high priest had talked to us about the advantage of getting initiated in the society on the 31st of October, that night I came home, went to bed, and I couldn't sleep till about 3 o'clock in the morning. Because I had all of this experience of the supernatural that I'd gone through for so many months now, and my Catholic upbringing that I've had, and questions about God. Now I knew there's a God, because the Spiritist made me well aware of that. But I was in a state of terrible unrest. I could not have slept. And without even giving it a thought, somehow, I said, as I was laying on my bed, I said, if there's a God up there that cares for me, help me. That's all I said. Next thing I knew, the alarm clock rang. It was 6:30. It was time for me to get up and go to work. At that time, I had changed employment. I had taken a course in embroidery for the manufacturers of ladies' dresses in Montreal. There's embroidery companies that makes all this, the piping and sequence work and all of this,
fancy
designs
Sure.
and ladies' dresses. And that's where I was working at the time.
You were just 72 hours away, as Karen mentioned a moment ago. You had prayed, without even realizing what you were doing. God was about to rescue you in a very special way. Tell us about that. What happened that Monday morning?
Well, let's go back to the Friday.
Okay.
Previous to that. I was working for a Jewish firm. And the bosses, one kept the Sabbath, and the other didn't. And Harry, which was the one that didn't, as I was going out to have my cigarette at the afternoon break, he said, "Roger, when you come back in, come into my office, I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay." So I came back in, and he said, "Close the door." I closed the door. He said, "I want you to do me a favor." "Oh? What do you mean?" "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "You notice yesterday or a couple of days ago, there was a fellow here that I showed around the shop?" And yeah, I said, "Yes." "Well, he's going to be starting to work here Monday. And he's not just an average guy. He's a Christian, but keeps the Bible Sabbath." I said, "Go over that again?" He says, "Yes, like the Jewish people, he keeps the 7-day Sabbath. Saturday is the 7th day of the week." "Well," I said, "let me tell you, sir, the nuns have told us that there's been a mistake made in the calendar, that actually what shows to be Sunday is the 7th day of the week." "Oh, no," he says, "there wasn't no mistake made in the calendar," he says. "Saturday is the 7th day of the week, and you see it on your calendar." And he says it never was changed. And Sunday is the 1st day of the week. Oh, and I said, "That's interesting." I said, "I'm going to have to go to the library and check this out." "Oh, you don't have to," he says. He pulled out his desk drawer open, pulls out his big dictionary, and he looks up Saturday. And he said the 7th day of the week. And he looked at it on Sunday, and he said the 1st day of the week. Okay. Well, I said, that's pretty interesting. Now, here's what I'd like you to do for me. I'd like you to, first of all, I'm going to have this man work next to you, on the machine next to you. And don't tell him that I want to know what denomination he belongs to. You got to be very tactful. You have all the time in the world, even if it takes a month, he says. He says, I tell you what, he says, it's the craziest thing. He says that I've been thinking about this guy, and I can't get it out of my mind. About this, the fact he's a Christian and keeps the 7th-day Sabbath, keeps the Bible Sabbath. And he said, I got more important things to think about than stuff like that. So he said, I want to find out what denomination he belongs to, and I just did. I said, why didn't you ask him? Well, he said, no, I wouldn't do that. That's too personal. Okay.
So he wanted you to ask him and find out for him.
Find out and not let him know that the boss was interested to know. So Monday morning came, and the new fellow came in, and the boss introduced him to the people. There was about maybe 50 people working in that plant. And he said, Cyril's an accomplished embroiderer, and we'll be very happy to have him here with us, and made a little speech. Then he walked him to his new machine, and he says, Roger, meet Cyril, and I shook his hand, and we started to work. And it was not more than about 20 minutes that I was working that my machine started to skip stitches. So what happened? You have to stop and back up where you were. And I was working on sequins. In other words, the sequins come up. There's a row of thread behind it. They're all set up, and it's on a spool. And then the needles put them in there. And when it skips, you got to stop, back up, start over it from where it left off. It wasn't too long that I'd done this 2 or 3 times.
And that really made you happy, I bet.
Man, I was mad. And as a French person, usually they don't go easy on the saints and gods. That was using some language was not that great for Cyril. But anyway, I called the boss over. I said, come and see this machine. I'm having trouble with it. He checked it, worked on it for 5 minutes, work with it. Beautiful. I sit down again, start to work, the same thing happens over again. Harry, after he tried that 2 or 3 times, he said, Joe, come over. He's the old guy that knows everything about everything, you know, in the shop. So he looks at the tensions and adjusts things, and he says, it's working beautiful. Well, I started to work again, another 20 minutes after, the same thing, and I had to stop, whole thing. By then, you know, it was time to go out for the coffee break.
Cyril and Cynthia, so good to have you folks come down and visit with us for a short time today. And Cyril, I want to start off our visit by just asking you about an experience you had, I believe, almost 45 years ago.
That's right.
You had gone to work at a new embroidery shop in Montreal, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that was at the next machine to you that first day you went there. Did you notice anything strange about him?
Yes, I did notice he had some peculiarities that, well, to say the least, they were different. First of all, when he worked at his machine, when he had a little malfunction, he knew how to, well, criticize the machine by using some language that was quite offensive to me, at least. He would curse at the machine, and in both French and English. He was quite a linguist. And when my machine would break, he noticed that I would just fix it and keep on working. There was a difference, and he noticed a difference himself. We were both behaving differently when our machines didn't function right.
Now, so that very first day, there were problems with the machines. Your machine and his machine
Right.
had problems.
They both had problems.
But you had a chance at the break time to get acquainted with him. And how did he approach you?
Well, he approached me with a question, sort of. He said, I noticed that when your machine gives trouble, you don't get angry. You just fix it and keep on working. And I told him, well, it didn't make sense to get angry with the machine. It's an inanimate object. And he sort of apologized for his getting angry with his machine. And we started a conversation there, and it gave me the opportunity to sort of introduce him to some of the things I had experienced just a few days before.
And what were the things that you had just experienced a few days before?
I was getting some Bible studies from a minister named Elder Warren Taylor. And although I wasn't an Adventist, I was quite moved by those Bible studies because of the fact that as he gave the Bible studies, he kept it quite simple. And he would prove everything he would say. Even if it's from the Bible, he would prove it. And in some cases, he proved it from worldly books such as the Encyclopedia Britannica. And he gave good evidence of everything that he was saying was true.
So I started walking out, and I told Sarah, I said, have you ever seen such a crazy thing as this, the trouble I have with this machine? No, he said, it's a new machine. I said, brand new machine, just a month old. He said, that's very unusual. So we go downstairs, and I said, do you have any suggestions how to fix this problem? No, not really, but he says, I have a suggestion that might help. He says, I heard you, he says, calling upon God, but it was not in the way that I would have liked to hear you talk. He says, go easy on God, he says.
Did that offend you, Roger?
You know, I said, thank you. You did not offend me, because it was pleasant about it. And I said, you know, I said, thank you. I said, I'm sorry if I offended you by my language. It sounded, he says, it didn't bother me. I said, by the way, I said, this is the opening. You're quite a religious man, I understand. Yeah, he said, I read the Bible and go to church. That's great. I said, what denomination do you belong to? Well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Excuse me? Repeat that again? He says, yeah, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist.
Did that shock you?
Well, the word Adventist shocked me. The Adventist, you see, I had heard so much about the Adventist, but Seventh-day Adventist, I had never heard the name before. I said, what does it signify, the name? He says, well, we're seven-day observers. We believe in the Bible Sabbath, that God has blessed a particular day of the week and has sanctified it. It's put a special blessing on there, and that we ought to count our blessings on the seventh day and, you know, give God the honor that is due to his holy name. Is there any difference between what they call, some people call the Adventists and Seventh Adventists? Oh no, it's just the same people. Most people just talk about the Adventists, and you know, people know that they're talking about the Seventh Adventists.
Then your interest was really piqued.
Now I said, man, What a unique thing to have happened to me, that I meet one of these guys.
You're together out there at your first break time, and you're discussing the language on the job when the machines had broken down, but you had an opportunity to begin to share some of this newfound faith that you had been discovering.
Right.
Did you find him to be interested, open?